oh, if I just make my circumstances better, then I'll feel fulfilled. And I definitely got trapped in that one, and then I hit all my boxes. I checked every box. My business was over 7 figures. I had the house, I had the kid, I had the partner, I had all the things I ever wanted in my life. And I still felt unfulfilled.
Today, we're going to be talking with one of the most outspoken experts on the topic of sex and sexuality, how that relates to fulfillment, and how you could have even more pleasure in your life. Hey everybody, I'm here with an internationally recognized award-winning sexologist and best-selling author. She's the creator of The Erotic Blueprint. You may have recently seen her on Netflix's Goop on Sex. I'm also grateful to call her a dear, dear friend. Please welcome Jaiya to the show. Thank you for being here with us.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, this is...
Everything's a pleasure.
I know. I love that brand. Absolutely. And you're a great reminder to that in my life, and I imagine in many people's lives, which is why this is probably one of the scariest podcasts I could imagine doing. It's just my upbringing where we didn't really talk about sex. It's like, Catholic upbringing. There's a lot of guilt and shame around that stuff. So I was like, I don't know, is this okay? Will my employees hear this? Will my parents hear this? And I'm sure the answer is yes. So I'm just disclaiming that now that I'm very uncomfortable with this idea and I'm going to do it anyway.
Hello, parents. Hello, employees.
Yeah.
I promise I don't bite unless you really want me to.
Sure. They're going to all love that. My parents especially are like, cool. Stop the podcast right here.
And that's the beautiful thing. There's a choice to not listen,
That's right.
Yeah, if it's TMI, and I do get TMI. So just a little disclaimer. This is about sex.
Yeah. And I very much appreciate that. I just think it's such an important topic, and it's something that has been really important for me recently as I've really not connected to myself in a lot of ways. And knowing that leaning into this, just doing this podcast was for me to say, like, I actually shouldn't be ashamed of that aspect of my life, that aspect of me as a man. And so I do have to start with one question though, which is for most people, I know at this point, but how do you describe what a sexologist is?
Well, one of the things I think that distinguishes my work is that I'm a somatic sexologist, which means it's body-based sexologist. And I think I've dedicated my life to this mission of discovering all that is erotically possible as a sexologist. So the word somatic means body-based. So I'm not just like a sex therapist would be more mental. As a somatic sexologist, I work in the body. I'm also working with the psycho-emotional, psycho-spiritual biochemistry of a person. But a sexologist, I believe, is somebody who really dedicates their life to this study of what is this thing, sex, and how do we do this thing, sex, well and healthfully and with a lot of empowerment, and peeling back the layers of conditioning, shame around pleasure. Because pleasure is still a taboo.
What was the moment where you knew that this was your path?
Oh, I was very young. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I remember seeing Dr. Ruth on television. And I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be just like Dr. Ruth. And I always joke, it just started with all my friends. I wanted to tell them the truth about where babies came from. It wasn't a stork. It wasn't an immaculate conception. Here's the truth about all of this. And I was the kid in the library, like looking up every book on sex that I could find and trying to discover the truth. I've always been a seeker of the truth. And what is the truth around this thing that we call sex? And how do I bring that truth to other people? Yeah.
So you're talking teenager?
Oh, yeah, even younger. I was like 6 or 7. As soon as I could read,
Wow.
I was sneaking the books in the library in a different section. I lived at the library because I couldn't bring them home with me because I also grew up Roman Catholic. So,
Well, there you go. And that was going to be the question is how did you shield yourself from the guilt and the shaming and still continue? Because I feel like I just would cut myself off, right? It was like the idea of trying to question sex and pleasure and all that stuff was like, nope, can't do that. Sins. There's a voice, there's a God in my head that's like, you're going to hell if you think about that. How did you
Right.
overcome that as a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old?
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily shielded myself. I think that all of that still was present and still affected my life and still affected my sexuality. I just think that the curiosity was stronger. I had an overriding curiosity about this thing and an overriding wanting to know about my relationship with God and wanting to know what is my own truth that overrode a lot of the shaming and trauma, religious trauma that can come from some of this messaging. And it's been really interesting because I also have studied a lot about religion and what philosophy says and theology is philosophy and theology and what does it say about sexuality truly, or how much of that messaging really just came from a sex negative point of view that was passed down from the powers that be, and that can be a dangerous thing to say. It can be dangerous to say, hey, the people were wrong who were in power. It isn't actually what the Bible says. It isn't actually what scripture says. How are we interpreting those things? Even talking about self pleasure and masturbation. I like the word self pleasure because the word masturbation means to pollute oneself with one's hands. And so even the languaging that we have around sexuality is a languaging of shame. The pudendal nerve, which innervates our genitals, is pudendal means shame. It's the nerve of shame. So
Wow.
we have all of this inherited stuff that actually isn't quite accurate. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that self-pleasure is bad or wrong. It talks about onanism. We have onanism, but that's a different interpretation. That's not getting the brother pregnant, the wife pregnant, not the brother, the wife pregnant of the brother who died, like because you were supposed to have babies. Like that was what that was about. And then you also have to take in the culture of the time and the teachings of the time and how all of that got translated and passed down. So it really is an interesting, fascinating wormhole to go down to even just look at, well, what is actually being said in our spiritual books and what it actually is the truth about sex and what is being taught. And I think that when you look fundamentally, what is being taught is that sex is a sacred act. And there is a way to have sex where it's not hygienic. A lot of times it's talking about hygiene. Like if you're going to do this, take a shower afterwards. Like it actually says that, you know, like, so there's things about hygiene and there are things about right frame around sexuality. What is the frame of your intention? How are your behaviors in alignment with the divine and this idea of life and procreating? And so it's just all like a super fascinating thing to look at. And then what's my own truth within all of what religion does say about sexuality? And then how do I peel back the conditioning? And so I think to answer your question, to come back to that, is the thing that I was constantly doing is looking inward and not understanding how something that felt so good could be so wrong, and how we could shame something that every single person is here because somebody had sex. And even if we look at that, if we look at like insemination, the sperm and the egg, there's, the egg is allowing the sperm in. We can say that that is sex as well. And we're all a product of sex. So being that we're all a product of sex, there's no shame. If we shame sex, then we're shaming all of humanity. But if we see sex as a sacred, beautiful act, then humanity becomes a sacred, beautiful product, a creation of love, a creation of pleasure. And isn't it more useful to have that frame that we are all a product of pleasure and love, and therefore we are love and pleasure? We are the byproduct of that, rather than the byproduct of something that's bad, shameful, and dirty.
Well, I mean, you're touching on stuff, and I was actually thinking about this before we got on. I'm like, how much of myself am I willing to share in this capacity? Again, like all the fears come up, right? But I feel like this wouldn't be art if I wasn't sharing from my heart about some of the things that come up. And I know for me, because I was raised in a way of, again, everything's shame and guilt. Masturbation is guilt. You're going to hell. I remember I had a youth minister that told me that. Um, the idea was like, all right, well, then I'm going to learn to embrace shame and guilt, to take my power back. And it only actually feels like sex if it feels wrong.
Mm.
Now, if I'm with someone who I love and we actually are having sex because we love each other, now it feels like that's not the sex I remember from when I was young. That's not the way I was taught sex. I was taught it as shame and guilt and regret. Um, and so I wonder, like, how does that show up for people? Have you seen that as a frequent pattern in other people, or is that something that's relatively unique?
Absolutely. I think that we all get the message that this is a shameful thing. Unless we had parents who were really progressive and taught us otherwise, but then we still get the message from the culture. We still get the message that there's something wrong from just I think it's just gotten ingrained in us deeply, deeply in a genetic, collective level. It's deeply ingrained in us. And so I think that there's a lot of people for whom if sex isn't dangerous, if sex doesn't feel taboo, if sex doesn't feel shameful, then it doesn't have that spark. It must not be good sex or, and some of that comes to blueprinting, which maybe we'll talk about. The erotic blueprinting, it has a little to do with a kinky blueprint, which is if it feels taboo, then it's a turn on. But there's a difference between
Yeah.
something feeling taboo and something feeling shameful. So if you're feeling shameful, you're feeling, Brene Brown talks about this, I am bad. I am dirty. If you're feeling it's taboo, it has spark to it. And that's different. It's different because shame is very destructive. And I'll also add, there's nothing here that I'm saying where I'm like, change, fix, or improve that. When I talk about shame being destructive, what I'm interested in is what is your relationship with shame that you can say, hey, shame, I hear you. I see you. You're accepted in me as well. You get to come be part of the pleasure party. And also, maybe the shame isn't serving me anymore. So can I give you a new job? Can I upgrade you to when maybe my behavior's off? And you can come in and say, hey, ding, 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 where it's not I am bad. It's more maybe this behavior isn't necessarily the healthiest sexual behavior that there is to be in.
I think that's what I more relate to, is that I think that there were even women I would be attracted to and I would feel sexual desire. And I didn't want to feel that because, again, for me, sexual desire equaled shame. So then
Right.
resenting that person, like
Mm,
pushing that person out because it's like, get away from me. You're causing me to feel more shame.
right.
And so I imagine that's kind of what you're talking about, where it is a destructive energy because instead of being even just to admire someone who I think is beautiful, I couldn't do that. I couldn't just be in admiration. It was almost like, no, just you existing in my presence makes me uncomfortable.
Yep. And then I don't know how to sit in that discomfort. So instead, I will push away, I will run away, I will do all kinds of interesting behaviors because sitting in the discomfort is the last thing that I want to do. And I think we all
Yeah.
need to learn in this culture. And as we're unraveling all of this, how do I sit in the erotic tension? How do I sit in the discomfort? Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is that it's unpleasant. It's not pleasure. That discomfort is not pleasure, and we don't recognize that. And so instead of looking to alleviate, instead of looking and there's nothing wrong with looking to alleviate. I don't want anyone to hear that. But what I'm curious about is how do we sit in the discomfort when our attractions are uncomfortable, when our sexual tension is uncomfortable, when it brings up shame? What is it to sit in that discomfort and to talk to it and say, "What are you here for? What are you trying to show me? How can I integrate this?" And to do the work, to do the healing work that is required to then either transform that, integrate it, give it an upgrade, keep accepting it. Oh, there's that discomfort again. Okay, I'm going to keep leaning in instead. I'm going to get curious instead.
Yeah. The desire part, like being in the discomfort of desire, that's a question I asked someone else who was on the podcast. And I'm really curious to hear more about how does someone, besides just acknowledging and noting it, noting that discomfort, is there an is there a specific suggestion or a practice someone could do beyond just noticing it to say, like, yes, it's okay. I have this desire. For example, like go back to the Bible, right? Like you're not supposed to covet thy neighbor's wife. So
Mhm.
if you happen to live next to someone that has a smoking hot wife, that kind of sucks. You're like, I do have desire for this person because they're beautiful, whatever it is. But now I feel I'm wrong for having that desire. So I want to
Mhm.
stuff that desire down or make myself wrong for that desire. How would you, like, if you're working with someone, how do you support them in not making themselves wrong for that?
Mhm. I think the first step is what about that desire is distressing? What's the distress? The distress is because desire in itself is not a problem, right? It's desire creates the world. And so there's this interesting thing of like, okay, there's that belief system to unravel that desire is bad in and of itself. And then there's the stuffing of it. And so the first step I would do is, okay, well, what's the part of you that's has this? And then how do we then integrate that part by seeing what that part actually wants? Some people talk about IFS. I didn't know IFS, but I do um, something called accelerated evolution, which helps people to then take a part like that and integrate it so that there's no longer an emotional charge around desire. And the way that we do that is we see what is the goal of the desire. So if I were leading you right now, I'd say, Nick, what's the goal of your desire? What does it want?
Honestly, I think it just likes to be able to be in the fantasy. I think the fantasy is fun. I think it's really fun to play in the pretend of what could be and the possibility.
Great. So it wants the possibility and playing in the pretend of the possibility. So then we start to imagine that that has happened. And that's how we start to integrate it. And then a new goal will come and a new goal. And we just keep working until there's no more goals of the desire. And then some interesting things can happen. People can move into expanded states of awareness or what we call pleroma state um, to integrate that back in to the wholeness. It's like holotropic work. Stan Groff talks about holotropic work. It's bringing that part that's in distress back into wholeness again.
So you're literally talking about, like, again, if I said I have a desire for a mansion and blah, 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 it's all right, well, let's pretend you have a mansion. And then
Yep.
you're in that mansion. What's the goal now? And it's like, oh, I want to throw crazy parties and whatever, right? And then it's like, cool. So you throw a crazy party. What's the goal of that party? So you're saying just keep following that until there's nothing
Keep following
else
it
to
until there's
do.
no more goals. But here's the trick there has to be always the goal is higher. So you have a mansion. Great. Now, what's higher? A higher goal than that. A more important goal than that. Oh, inviting all my friends over so I can have connection. Great. Okay. Now, what's a higher goal than that? That I'm never alone,
Hmm.
or something like that. It's connection, which is connection with everybody. Great. What's a higher goal than that? Oneness. Great. What's a higher goal than that? Unconditional love for all beings. What's a higher goal than that? Maybe there's nothing higher than that.
That's interesting. And then in that case, if the person comes to that moment, you're saying sometimes it will kind of snap them out of the pattern and realize it wasn't necessarily the path to get there that was important, or like, I'm
Well,
very
there's all
curious.
kinds of realizations. Most of it is just that all of it's already done. So there's no more charge around it anymore.
I see.
Then you're free. You're just free of the charge.
Yeah. Wow. That's big. Yeah. I mean, it is shocking for me to hear that desire in itself shouldn't be uncomfortable. It shouldn't be unpleasurable to be in desire or to be in
Mm-mm.
fantasy or to be in want. And
Mhm.
also, I mean, I am not conditioned that way. So that's also part of what I think we talk about parts work. For me, I'm more familiar with IFS than the, what'd you say, accelerated evolution.
Uh-huh.
So from a parts perspective, yeah, there's another part of me that comes up and says, you're not supposed to want those things. Like, you're supposed to be more humble. You're supposed to appreciate what you already have. By you
Right.
wanting more, you're just ungrateful. There's a lot of narrative that comes along with that.
And so, yeah, it's like all that narrative, just continuing to integrate it back into wholeness, all that narrative and watching all that narrative because you can clear it with a number of different things. So, and what would it be to empty that narrative out completely? For
Yeah.
that narrative to just be completely understood. And then I think what it often is seeking is to be understood, to be seen, to be heard with someone who can hold loving presence that isn't trying to change, fix, or improve it. We're not trying to change, fix, or improve, and I think that that's what so many people are trying to do, especially around sexuality. Is I'm gonna do the next sex technique, and I'm gonna change my shame, and I'm gonna fix this. And what if we all just stop changing, fixing, and improving, and we're able to be with each other and understand each other right there? I mean, I think that right there can make great sex. because you're seeking to understand, not do to another person. I'm going to give them an orgasm. Well, maybe not. Maybe what if you're just listening? That's the number one technique. People always ask me, what's a tip or a technique? And awareness, learning to be with and listen. And then when you can learn to listen, then something magical happens. Because you're not trying to get somebody to an orgasm, or you're not trying to get them to feel a certain pleasure. You're not trying to do that yourself. There's some doors that open up that are, you know, when they're directly experienced, you'll understand what I'm saying.
What does it really mean to listen, though, in that context? I mean, I understand literally, like if someone was talking, maybe trying to hear what they're saying, but what are other ways that someone can really be in listening?
Well, if you just put your hand on someone's body and maybe you spend 30 minutes there without moving, and you listen with your hand and not just your ears, you're listening with you're listening with your sensation. And so, is it warm? Is it cool? What's the texture? What happens when the person breathes? What's happening in the rest of their body as you're making that contact with their skin? What's happening in your own body as you're making contact with that skin? Can you then listen with your eyes? Can you see like what's happening under your hand? How movement might happen, subtle movements. What's the smallest little thing? When I was in massage school, we had to do this exercise where you would put a hair in a Bible, because the Bible pages are really thin, and you would feel the hair through the Bible page. And then when you could feel that really well, you'd do another page and you'd practice feeling the hair through 2 pages. And then you just keep adding pages and still being able to feel that hair. And that's listening. I'm listening for that underneath all these different layers, because not only are you at the skin layer, but you can start to listen to the fascia layer. You can start to listen to the muscles. You can start to listen to the blood flow, the bone, the nervous system. You can start to listen to all of that just through a simple touch. And there's
Wow.
so much information there. So much information that we miss because we're
Yeah, goal
and there's a place
oriented.
for that too.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I mean, I'm inspired by what you're saying, because it's something that I think, even just in that context, it's a great lesson. But I think in life, it's something that I think many of us lack, especially the high achievers, right?
Mhm.
Running ahead, win everything, get all the awards, just crush life. And
Yep.
it's like,
And if I go 30 seconds to the left in circles really, really fast, then maybe I'll also achieve the orgasm goal.
yes,
Yes.
yeah,
If I just know all the right techniques, then I'm going to achieve the thing. And let me tell you, I spent a lot of my life teaching sex techniques, and the sex techniques, they don't necessarily get you there. What I'm interested in with high performers is how to move from high performance to peak existence.
that's a big statement.
From high
Yeah,
performance to peak existence. It's a very different, and believe me, I am a recovering high performer, and I learned about how to live in peak existence, where I'm not no longer focused. Achievement happens within peak existence, but I'm no longer focused on the achievements because I was running away from something. What was my from? Always my from was, you know, I had a very strong thing that I was running in the high performance. And I think it's really interesting for us to stop and go, okay, this has been my way. I've been stuck in action orientation. What happens when I move into experiential orientation? I'm working with a friend of mine on a new podcast, Ori Zimmels, and part of what we talk about are these 3 orientations. Are you oriented toward action, which is a lot of high performance? Where it's do, or are you oriented toward circumstance? If I just do all these things, then I'm going to have a better circumstance. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to have a bigger house. I'm going to, I'm going to improve my circumstances of life. And that gets even further away from self. The more circumstantial you are, then there's action orientation. And then the one that's closest to self is experiential orientation. And experiential orientation is when you can be in the pleasure without doing anything. You're just being. And, I music is a great way to say this. Can you listen to an entire song from start to finish and experience it not doing the listening, but experiencing the music. And that's a big difference in sex. Are you in action? Are you just trying to do? Are you in circumstance where you're just trying to get to the orgasm so that the person loves you more? Or are you in experience? Good sex happens in experience where you are listening and feeling and expressing from self.
How would someone, for someone who's listening right now, and also for someone who's hosting the podcast, let's say, how would someone find their way to peak experience? Like right now, my goal is to be as authentic as I can and try to make a really good show. And on some level, like also um, make sure that I'm worthy of your time, right? There's like all these other things that are going on in my head and not embarrass myself publicly, blah, 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 blah. How would I shift, or how would a listener shift into peak experience right now?
We could start with just a breath. Can you be with one breath and drop in to yourself right now? Who's the one who's sitting here right now on this interview?
Yeah. Yeah, I can do that.
Hi. Yeah. That's
It's a beautiful
one easy
paradigm.
way.
Yeah. And again,
And
like for
I'll
someone
ask
who's,
myself that question. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I imagine a lot of people that are listening to podcasts, if they relate to what I do as a high achiever, I'm like, if I have a moment where I also have open ear channel, let me shove more information in there so I could really make this moment extra count.
Right.
So if someone is listening to this, I imagine, especially on this topic, they're probably thinking there's some goal. They're here to achieve something, to take something away. But as a listener to something like content or learning or TED Talks, whatever that thing is, how can someone be more experiential in the intake of information, in the process of learning?
Hmm. Making learning more experiential. That's a really good question. So I think that there's a natural curiosity for all of us who love to take a lot of content in. And one of the things that's important is to not let it just be more information you're taking in, but how are you integrating that information by doing something somatic with it? So, moving your body in a certain way, as you're learning, maybe there's a physiological thing that you're doing as you're learning. Can you go out and implement right away? Can you teach it to another person right away? So you're expressing it. You've taken it in, you're absorbing it, but then expressing it can be a way of really integrating content. Can you listen to music and dance while you're listening to a podcast at the same time? That may feel like a little too much stuff, but I actually really enjoy having music on while I'm listening to something, while I'm moving my body all at the same time, because it feels like it's getting it more into an experience of the content. And it's the difference between, listening to a podcast, on a travel podcast on a destination location, let's say India, and going to India. So as you're learning, how can you go to India? What are the ways in which you are going to enjoy it? I don't know. And then also sometimes I self-pleasure while I'm listening to things. I'm taking in content. That brings it way into my body. Why not? I mean, why not make it more pleasurable? It's a
Chapter
primary
3 was
question.
orgasmic.
Make learning orgasmic.
Yeah, I can see that. So it's a great e-learning platform. Amazing. I'm sure someone will be inspired to build that for us. I'd love to pivot a little bit into the erotic blueprint, which again, I think I've heard I don't know if it's because I'm in New York and everyone talks about this, but everyone talks love languages. They're talking like, oh yeah, when you're dating someone, if you don't have the right love language, it showed up in all the dating apps when I was on them. I'm really curious to hear more about the erotic blueprint and how people might be able to lean into that for themselves to maybe understand more about how they are relating to their partner or partners.
So there's 5 erotic blueprints, and I'll just go through them really quickly so everyone has a little bit of common language. So the energetic, and that's somebody who's turned on by anticipation, space, tease, longing, yearning. Their superpower is that they can have orgasms without even touching. And the shadow side of the energetic is that they're hypersensitive, so they can short circuit, get overwhelmed, flooded very easily if spaces collapse too quickly. The sensual is someone who's turned on by all of their senses being ignited: smell, taste, the hot bath, the roses, the romantic gestures. Superpowers that they can have orgasms anywhere on their body, non genital orgasms, orgasms from eating something, where, it's more about the beauty of the experience that's bringing the orgasmic delight. And the shadow side is getting stuck in their heads, really hard time feeling the pleasure in their body because they're so distracted by all of the mental mind chatter. The sexual is someone who's turned on by what we think of as sex in our culture. So, penetration, nudity, orgasms, getting to that end goal, the achievement of sex. And the superpower is that sex is fun, it's enjoyable, it's easy. It's not simple. I think a lot of people think sexuals are very simple. I'll take that back. It's not lacking depth, but it does have a simplicity to it. It's not lacking depth, but it has a simplicity to it. And then the shadow side of the sexual is focus on the goal, focus on the achievement, missing the journey, missing out on the experience of it, and also just a relieving of the sexual tension. That actually is discomfort. So the pleasure comes when the orgasm comes because it's relieving that tension. Um, and then the kinky, and the kinky is someone who's turned on by the taboo of sex. So whatever is taboo for you, and that could be psychological taboo, power play, different dynamics. It could be sensation play, rope, impact play, these kinds of things. The superpower of the kinky is also similar to the energetic, where they can have orgasms from going into expanded states of consciousness. And then and also I'll also say superpower is creativity, unlimited creativity. And then the shadow side of the kinky is shame, a lot of depth of shame. Why am I turned on by this taboo thing? Is it okay? I don't know. Those kinds of thoughts are often running through, and the shame can often be distressing for someone in the kinky blueprint. And then the shapeshifter. And the shapeshifter is someone who's turned on by all of it, everything that I just said. They love it. Their superpower is that they can become a really amazing lover because they can shapeshift to please anybody in any blueprint. And the shapeshifter shadow is that they shapeshift all over the place, and they're really starving because they're not getting all of the blueprints fed. They're shapeshifting often to please other people, and they can also have the shadow of all the other blueprints. So those are the 5 blueprints. And then how they are in relationship, really, I think the first step is knowing who you are. So when you know who you are, similar to the love languages, when you know who you are, you can really own yourself. There's less shame in, oh, I'm one of those energetics who I thought I was always just really weird, or I thought I was, not into sex, when really I was just energetic and I needed a lot of space. And all my turn on an orgasm is actually in not being touched. I'm not so weird. That's actually a blueprint. And there's lots of people who are energetically wired. And so I think that there's a nice relaxation and understanding of ourselves once we know what our blueprint is. And then we can really own it in relationship to others. Like, here's who I am. Who are you? I'm owning who I am without shame. And I'm curious about who you are and how do we play together? And there's a whole bunch of, I don't really believe in sexual incompatibility. I only believe in unwillingness in relationship. So when it comes to compatibility, I think it's like any skill, you just learn it. You just learn the language. It's like if your partner speaks French and you speak American English, you're going to learn French because you love them. They're going to learn English because they love you. And it's not about, we're not compatible. It's just about, now I just need to learn. But if I'm unwilling to learn, then there's incompatibility. If I'm unwilling to learn, but that's really what it comes down to. So owning, and then the last one is living the blueprint. So how are you living it? And comes back to that experiential realm that I was talking about. Live like you know who you are. And that takes courage. How do you implement that into all of your life to really live from who you truly are?
I'm wondering, with the people that you've worked with, how often do you find that people, even in long-term relationships, have never had the courage to express either who they are or what they want to their partner?
Yeah, 100%. That's a lot of what I work with. And I'll see people who've been in a relationship for 40 years and they've never said what their sexual desires are. They've never had a conversation
Wow.
about sex, you know? And, it's interesting because I think a lot of people, when they don't talk about sex, think they're on different pages, and then I'll have them go through, "Well, what is it that you really desire?" And we get to start to talk about it, and in that, they find out that there's actually more overlap in what they do desire than not. And that's always a really lovely, lovely moment. But yeah, there's a lot of people who do not ever have a conversation about sex. And part of that comes from the sex is shameful. It's not something we're supposed to talk about because we all got a sex education. People tell me all the time, I didn't get any sex education. I'm like, no, you did get a sex education. Your sex education was don't talk about it. Your sex education was this is wrong. Your sex education was this is something that should stay hidden. And now we're going to get a different sex education. But all of us got a sex education. Whatever message you've gotten from parents, culture, religion has been your porn, has been your sex education. And the question now is now you're an adult and you're at choice over what your education is. So, how about getting a different education around your sexuality? What would that look like for you to start to educate yourself in a different way? Where sex isn't so hidden and sex is talked about. And sometimes that happens in community, having a good community that's sex positive or having a mentor or a coach or someone that you can start to unravel the shame or the hiddenness around talking about this.
When it comes to sexual trauma, which we'll step into for a second, I imagine that there are people who are afraid to express things to their partner because they just don't want to deal with the shame. But I also imagine when you start to step into the level of trauma that there are people that don't even know within themselves.
Right.
So it's, how do you help someone access something that they won't even want to see within themselves, or they've cut off just to manage their way through life?
Hmm. Very slowly and very gently. I think that trauma can be really tricky, and I'm not a trauma therapist, but I am somebody who's very trauma informed and I work with a lot of trauma because you can't work in sexuality without working with trauma. And there really is going at a person's pace of their own nervous system, making sure they're working with a trauma therapist and in hand with me. And because I'm more somatic and body based, I'm interested in how the trauma is in their body. How has the trauma affected the body? Where is the trauma stored in the body? And how do we release it on all layers? And so when I'm working, I work very much in different layers of it. So there's the physical, this realm layer of it, and then there's the emotional layer of it, and then there's the transpersonal layer of it, which gets into collective trauma and archetypal trauma. Like for example, let's say a woman who feels like she can't speak up about her sexuality at all, and then that goes into the transpersonal trauma and the collective trauma of the feminine and how women have been persecuted for being sexually open or being open about who they are. And so then that goes into more of the transpersonal or collective aspect. And then there's the deepest layer of truth around it all. And once we get to truth, it's usually when the trauma clears from the body. Um, because within the truth, and when somebody sees that understanding and they can get to that content, through all those layers, then something beautiful usually happens for them where that starts to clear up.
I
But yeah,
imagine that's pretty amazing to witness.
it is. It is quite extraordinary to just hold space for somebody through that. And it's really them doing the work. I'm just holding presence. It comes back to that listening. I'm listening and holding presence with someone while they have a safe space to actually express how that trauma is in their body.
So if we had to pull all these threads to one, which is, again, the podcast is really about how do people truly find fulfillment? And I can't think of a more important question than connecting to the body, connecting to the self, being within your own pleasure, being in your own experience. Um, how much is that showing up in the conversations you're having with people? Or do they even know it's a lack of fulfillment? Like, I'm just wondering how that topic shows up in this work.
Hmm. It does. It shows up a lot. It shows up a lot, and there's lack of fun, there's lack of fulfillment, there's lack of um, creativity in relationships. And I think this is a fundamental question, though, not just in sexuality, but also in the world right now. We do not know how to practice satiation. And we are always looking for more, the next better orgasm, the next big, toy that's going to get me the higher pleasure. And then we become experience chasers as opposed to being in deep fulfillment. And I think that this is very true for high performers, where we think the next thing is going to bring us fulfillment, and we chase experiences or the new achievement, and that's going to bring us the fulfillment or the satisfaction or the satiation. And this, again, I'm going to go back to those three orientations, the circumstantial realm, like, oh, if I just make my circumstances better, then I'll feel fulfilled. And I definitely got trapped in that one, and then I hit all my boxes. I checked every box. My business was over 7 figures. I had the house, I had the kid, I had the partner, I had all the things I ever wanted in my life. And I still felt unfulfilled. And so then I went, oh gosh, something must be wrong with my brain. So I went and had my brain scanned. Just started doing all these things because, why do I still not feel fulfilled? Why am I not satisfied when I have everything society told me I should ever want? I've meet all my goals, met all my goals, and I still feel unfulfilled. And it's because the answer is not in the circumstantial realm. And same thing for your sex life. The next orgasm is not going to be the thing. The next partner who, you have mind-blowing sex with is not going to necessarily be the thing. The next sex technique the next circumstantial thing is not it. And the same thing for action. I thought, oh, if I just work harder, if I just do more, then maybe I'll feel fulfilled. And then there'll be a day when I can rest. Maybe you relate to that. Some of you who are listening and you're like, oh, I'll finally rest if I just do enough, and I didn't feel fulfillment from that either. And then there came, or even philanthropy, oh, if I just help more people, if I just do more and I contribute more and I have a mission-driven business, that's going to be the thing that's the final answer of my satisfaction and fulfillment. The only place that I feel true fulfillment is being in the moment in the experiential orientation. And that is self. The closer I am to self, the more fulfillment I feel, because it doesn't matter what the external circumstances are, and it doesn't matter what I'm doing. There is a relaxation into being. And that's when I talk about peak experience. That is the ultimate orgasm. The ultimate orgasm is the knowing of yourself, that then sex is just a byproduct of a celebration of your expression. Sex is a tool for your own awakening into self, not a thing that we're using to chase a circumstance or experience or a thing that we're doing. Sex is an experiential tool that brings you closer to the ultimate orgasm.
I was, for a second there, I was trying to put the pieces together in my head. I'm like, I think what I hear is, instead of experience chasing, just to really be in the one you're already in. Right, to fully be in the experience you're
That's a
currently
very
in.
succinct way to put it.
Yeah. Oh, again, my brain is a little engineering type thing.
I
So I'm
love
like, oh,
that.
got it. That's good.
I
So
love
it's
that,
to
though.
really find
Instead
myself in
of
the,
experience chasing, be in the experience that you're in, right here with yourself.
yeah.
And
And
when you're with the other, making love, same thing. It's be in that experience, not in the next moment of what's going to happen, but be in the feeling of your skin together, your breath on each other's bodies, the deliciousness of weight and pressure and smell, and if there's music playing, the deliciousness of your love in that moment.
well, this brings up for me one of the single most important things I ever think you told me. I mean, you've told me a lot of really important things. That's probably not fair to say that. It's one of the thousands of important things you've really told me that have affected my life. But you use the words resolving discomfort. And when you said that to me, I had a bit of a meltdown when I realized my entire life, not only do I feel shame for the things I want to do, but I feel as much shame for the fact that I really don't enjoy anything. When I
Mm.
play it all back, I'm like, I've done so much cool shit. I've been chasing, achieving things, and actually got those things and realized, well, this didn't make it work. So now I feel shame that I don't feel fulfillment for the thing I've been fighting for and disconnecting from people in my life for and spending money on and doing all these things. I'm like, my entire life has just been a series of resolving discomfort. I've not really experienced pleasure.
Pleasure.
And I'd love for you to talk more about that, partly because I hope I hope other people don't relate to it, but I imagine that many people do, to find out like this is why like I'm not really that happy in my
Right.
life. I am like my life moves forward in the bigger picture. It's really great, but moment to moment, I don't feel deep fulfillment in my life.
Yeah, speaking to that, I think people don't realize they're even in discomfort for a lot of people until they really stop or they hit all their goals and then it still doesn't feel fulfilling. It kind of sounds like you were at that place where I was of like, I checked all the boxes and then you're like, oh, it's kind of like a rock bottom, you
It
know?
really is. I mean, I thought of going to a friend's house. Someone invited me over, and I was like, you know what? I don't even like hanging out with that person. Like, I don't even know why I go there.
Right.
And it was like, oh, because I feel discomfort of I'm not being a good friend if I don't.
Right.
And so I go to resolve the discomfort of my own identity in relationship to this
Right.
person. And I'm like,
Oh,
that's crazy. Like all these things that I've done that I thought I'm being so charitable and I'm being so generous and I'm being a good person. In reality, it just made me miserable.
right. I'm just resolving. And so I think that this is an important thing for people to think about. It's just a question with anything. Are you just resolving discomfort or are you truly in pleasure? And to get real with yourself, does it bring you pleasure? I kind of have a thing of like, and I know this can be sound kind of hard for people, but I do what only brings me pleasure. And if I am going to step into something that is discomfort or I'm resolving discomfort, I'm doing it consciously, not unconsciously. Like, okay, I
Can
don't really love doing this thing, but I'm going to say yes to it um, because maybe I'm resolving discomfort, or I'm just going to say yes to it because it's what must be done right now. And that's okay. But I know that I'm making the conscious choice to do that. And then I ask myself, okay, well, how can I make it pleasurable? If I'm going to make the conscious choice to step into this thing, then how can I make that pleasurable? But I think it's important just step one is awareness. And then once you have that awareness, then you can be at more conscious choice about what you're doing.
Yeah, I can see that in a lot of things I do. I think about that even in the context of events or things that I'm obligated to go to. You know, it's a lot of times if someone's suggesting a certain restaurant they want to go to. I'm like, I don't really feel like arguing for the fact that that's not where I want to eat, so I'll tolerate it.
Mhm.
But I could see something as simple as that as saying, like, I'd actually rather be in the discomfort of having to argue over the food or, negotiate the food location, but at least then I'm enjoying the food I'm eating. At least I'm
Exactly.
having the pleasure of the food I'm
Or
receiving.
or you say to yourself, "Okay, the discomfort of negotiation, I'm gonna override, I'm gonna override so that I'm just gonna tolerate eating the food that I don't wanna, like, eat, but I made that choice."
Yeah.
And that's a big difference of, "Okay, I made that choice because it's your night to choose, and I don't really love that food, but how can I make it most pleasurable?
Yeah. And in
Or if
that
it's
case,
really shitty, can I enjoy that it's shitty?"
yeah, yeah. I'll get
Oh,
the shittiest
I
thing I
love
can.
it. I love this gross food. It's so good, you know?
Yeah, what I like about that too is then it breaks the lie for myself, which is I think that's why it's uncomfortable because I'm like, I know I'm lying to myself by saying I'm happy here.
Right.
I'd rather just be honest and say, actually, this is uncomfortable. This is not something I want to be doing, but I do it because I love this person. And now I don't have to resent them for it because ultimately that's what ends up
Exactly.
happening. I'm like, I resent you because you make me lie to myself.
Right. So just stop lying to yourself.
Yeah.
Get authentic, and that's where, there's authentic pleasure and there's resolving discomfort.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to call in a lot more authentic pleasure and really find the things that make me happy. And I hope everyone who's listening does that too. And uh, I'm really curious about someone who is living in your pleasure. It sounds like, I mean, from what we've talked about before, too, it sounds like you truly love your life, which is so rare for me to hear. I hear a lot of people say those words because it's like the PR campaign of their life. But I think like you're someone when I spend time with, I actually found this very intimidating at first because when we started to get to know each other, being around someone who's so rooted in themselves and being someone that was a validation seeker, it just was not compatible. I was
Mm.
like, you don't care what I do. And not in a bad way. Like, you're like, I don't know, like, be you, don't be you. Like you could do that, but it doesn't affect where I'm at. I'm still having a good time. And that
Oh.
was really interesting for me because I would use a lot of that dynamic in how I'd relate to people. Like, I'm going to do this so I can make you love me, or I'm going to do this so you like me more. I think I'm cool. And so being someone who's in this space of truly loving your life, truly feeling fulfilled, being in service of others, um, what do you dream about when you wake up? Like, what is your dream beyond?
Hmm. I dream for everyone to experience what I'm experiencing. I feel like everything that I do is an invitation into my world. Come experience what it's like here because it's so yummy. And so I have this, I guess I have a desire for people to wake up to their true authentic selves. And I dream of a world where we all are awake to that. And I dream of a world where sexuality is seen as the tool that it is. Instead of recreational, it is recreational for us. And I dream I dream of having enough resources to just unlimitedly create from experience for all people, that we all just have like the abundance of resource that we can create whatever it is. We don't have to worry about circumstantial realm anymore.
Mm. Is that a little bit like the question, if you had infinite money, what would you do? And then
Mm,
people just doing more of that thing?
yes. If you didn't have to worry about money, what would you be creating in the world? Because I think that there are some really brilliant people that would be creating some really brilliant things if they didn't have to worry about financial stability.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could. I have a sense of that myself. I think a lot about that. But for you, it's. I mean, I guess on some level, do you feel like you're kind of there as it is? Is there anything that you feel like you personally need to be able to create the things that you really want to create?
I feel it's a really good question. I had a moment yesterday. I'll share just a story to answer it. I had a moment yesterday with my coach because I think it's important that we all work with coaches. And I had a moment where I was working on working on the energy of pride. And again, this comes just like sexuality. There are things where we're taught, like pride is one of the seven deadly sins. And I kept having these little moments of like, I'm proud of myself. And I do this little pat on the back. And I really felt pride for the first time, like proud of myself for the first time. And it was like, I did it. Like I have everything I ever wanted, plus I'm fulfilled because I'm solid in myself. And I was just weeping at this moment of feeling like I have everything, everything. There's nothing that I want for in terms of in the part of what we were going through is he was just challenging me. If you lost your house, if I lost all of the circumstantial things, could I maintain the state that I'm in? And the truth that I got to was I'm me no matter where I am. I'm me. Not that I want that challenged. My preference is to have all of the beautiful circumstantial things that I have. And I'm me. And of course, could I utilize more resource in the meanness that I am to create more to help more people? Of course. Of course. I'd love to experience that. And the truth, when I get to the truth though, in who I am, the truth is that I am that abundance and I generate that abundance. And so I do already have all the resource. And of course, I could always use more.
Well, I hope a lot more is coming soon because we'll all appreciate you
I'll keep
setting the
having
rest of us up.
orgasms to manifest it.
Yeah. Is that like sex magic?
Yeah, like manifesting. So the way that I see sex magic is that I'm fueling myself and keeping myself really resourced. And because I'm so resourced, it's more easy for me to manifest. I'm utilizing sexual energy like fuel to manifest things in the world. And I'm focusing on it while I'm in pleasure. I'm visualizing myself in whatever it is that I'm creating or manifesting. I did a project that was every day I had an orgasm while I was manifesting something. And during that time, I quadrupled my income. So it was really a huge turning point in my career, actually. Every morning was just like me visualizing this goal of a certain income, and I actually quadrupled it.
I think we just figured out the show title, which is Masturbate Your Way to Success.
For those high achievers who want something to do.
That's right. 4x your income through frequent masturbation.
But did it bring me happiness and fulfillment? That's the question, you know? Again, like,
Yeah.
I quadrupled my income and a lot of other things, and so if I had really been asking the question of what brings me fulfillment, I think that this is a great question, you know? What truly brings us satisfaction? Can I be in the practice of satisfaction?
Yeah.
What does that truly look like? And to me, that is an orgasmic experiential experience. It's, you know, it's a direct experience of truth, that fulfillment.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. It was not as scary as I thought it would be. Uh yeah, I actually just I don't know. I'm just grateful you exist. It's like the stuff you do, the things you talk about, the way you affect people. Seeing you show up in a room, like when we were hanging out at Summit, just the way you show up in a room and it gives people permission to truly be themselves. I'm so grateful to know you and to witness that up close.
Thank you.
Ah,
Yeah, I mean,
and
we can talk about all kinds of juicy, sexy things. I'm talking really high level and essentially like the end game goal. The end game goal. You talked a little bit about that need for validation, and something that I wanted to say there was part of why I don't play that game is because I'm just in unconditional love for everyone. And when you're in unconditional love for people, they can do whatever they're doing. You know, and there's no like they don't they there's nothing that they can do, be, or have that's going to change my viewpoint of them.
yeah, and I think that's what it is for me is I've thought a lot about the idea of mirrors in our life
Mhm.
and how so few of us can truly turn the light on the mirror and be a real representation of who's standing in front of us so they could see themselves. And I remember
Right.
in the middle of one of our conversations, as I was talking and justifying myself, you just stared at me. One of the worst moments of my life, to be
I'm
honest.
just beaming you love.
Yeah, it was
So
so
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable because it really was just like, I see you. Look at
Mhm.
yourself. I see you. Look at
I
yourself.
see your racket.
Yeah, I see your game. And it was actually probably one of the moments I felt most naked in my life. I felt
Mhm.
most seen. There was no shield I could hide behind no matter what I did. You had like x-ray vision. And it was the most loving way anyone's ever been, the most confrontational.
Mm.
It was really, really special to watch that. So I aspire in a lot of ways to think more of how can I, in those moments where I really want to show up in love for someone, instead of browbeating them into being what I think they're supposed to be, because I somehow know what they're supposed to be.
Trying to change, fix, or improve them because we all love to
Yes.
do that in our relationships.
Yes. So what a turn on. Nothing more than a turn on
It's
of a turn on
such a
than being
turn
like,
off.
hey, let me tell you all the ways you could be different and better.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just I see how special and how rare that is. And I think the fact that you're helping people understand how to do that more, allowing themselves to have pleasure, allowing them to be in support of others through unconditional love, again, truly a great gift. And I can't highly recommend enough if you're moved by the things that Jaiya said. There's a ton of stuff that she has out there, and please do go check it out and just go down this road of again sex, love, self-expression, being equanimous. I think that's the word, having equanimity, however you're supposed to actually say it. Because I just think that's what I've seen in you is no matter what crazy shit I've ever told you before, you always kind of seem to find your way back to equanimity.
Mm. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought you were going to pause for a while and make me feel very uncomfortable again. Just let me sit in the discomfort of myself. But no, yeah,
Mm.
thank you for breaking the tension. And again, I'm just excited to also watch your journey and as we kind of bring the show to a close, um, definitely mark your calendars. December 15th, 2023, Jai's new book is coming out. I hope there's a book release party. I don't care where it is, I'll go.
Let's
And
do one in New York.
let's do it. I'm there. That would be really lovely. And also, if you're curious about the sexual blueprint, which again, it's just such an amazing framework. you could check out and take the quiz on the erotic breakthrough, which we'll put all the stuff in our show notes. So you could check that out. And Jai, is there anything else you want to say as a closing thought to all of our slightly uncomfortable family members of mine, possibly slightly uncomfortable employees, but other people that are really moved by all of this?
I'll give you a little homework, which is just for the rest of the day. Just ask, how could this be more pleasurable? And then shift things. If it's just the way you're sitting, if it's rubbing your thighs together, if it's taking a deeper breath. But how could you make this moment right here, right now, even more pleasurable? Just keep asking yourself that question for the rest of the day and see what happens.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for the time. And
Mhm.
yeah, I hope everyone really enjoyed this one.